Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 13 waiver wire targets for the 2021 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about prospects at the running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, kicker, and defensive positions as we approach Week 13. Not only to give our lineups the best overall chance of winning in this upcoming week, but to set our lineups up for success as we proceed to the singular goal that we're all trying to strive for: winning a 2021 fantasy football championship. We'll talk about prospects that currently, based on injuries and or their recent opportunities given by their respective teams, have been great fantasy prospects that may be able to not only start for your team, but help you throughout the rest of the season. I'll give you guys my thought process and opinion on every single one of those players, as we'll be talking about 6 running backs, 6 wide receivers, 3 quarterbacks, 3 tight ends, 3 kickers, and 3 defenses throughout the video. Again, as we typically do on a Monday, a lot of the information that I'm talking about isn't finalized because we don't have full information regarding some of these injuries. As you know, the thumbnail for today's video was Alexander Mattison, and we're not 100% certain as to what the exact status of Dalvin Cook's rest of season. Is he going to miss 1 to 2 weeks, or is he going to be out for the rest of the season, similar to a Christian McCaffrey, who we will of course talk about in relation to Chuba Hubbard, his backup. But either way, just wanted to give you some context there. And for those of you who have not yet already and are trying to win a 2021 fantasy football championship, subscribe to the channel with the content, whether it is the waiver wire videos, the rankings videos throughout the weeks, of course the live streams, hidden gems, must starts, trade targets, all of that coming in your direction for the rest of the 2021 season. Be sure to subscribe. Again, we are trying to get to our end season goal of 60K. So for those of you who haven't yet already, click the subscribe button. If you guys haven't checked out Underdog Fantasy, again, there are multiple contests every single week, every single day, regardless of fantasy sport, that you could be participating in today. Again, tonight we have the Monday night matchup between the Seattle Seahawks and the Washington football team. I will be drafting probably 4 or 5 teams for that contest in order to try to help myself win the grand prize. So for those of you who are interested in, of course, playing the weekly contests, perhaps playing pick'ems and much more down the line, be sure to sign up to Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code Andrew today when you sign up, and Underdog Fantasy is willing to match up to $100 of your first deposit. Extremely generous. If you guys are interested, check that out. The link is down in the description below. Again, use promo code Andrew. Thank you very much. All right, let's talk about our Week 13 waiver wire targets. I know Week 12 was unbelievable in terms of the injuries and or the performances that some of these players put forth, whether it was incredible like a Leonard Fournette or it was horrible like a Jalen Hurts completely disappearing. We'll talk about that as the week progresses, but either way, we want to go ahead and recover and specifically try to recoup as much value as we can, specifically for those of you who have lost a starting running back going into Week 13, who's perhaps going to maybe throw your season for a loop, maybe the end, to be honest, if you're not able to recover and get these players. We're going to start off by talking about Chuba Hubbard. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about him first and foremost at the running back position is because Christian McCaffrey has been already deemed out for the rest of the season. Considering he is going to be on his second stint of the injured reserve this season, that automatically deems him out for the rest of the season. Currently, Chuba Hubbard is only rostered in 37% of Yahoo leagues, and the rest of season schedule may not be pretty, but it is a starting running back. And for those of you who need to go ahead and recoup some value and get yourself a starter for the rest of the season, it's not a bad way to do it. In the 5 games that he was the starter for the Carolina Panthers this season, he averaged 13.52 half PPR fantasy points. There's a lot of value to be had there, but his rest of season strength of schedule makes him a little bit of a tricky overall start going forward. Not only this week do they have a bye week along with the Green Bay Packers, Cleveland Browns, and Tennessee Titans, but the following weeks after take on the Atlanta Falcons, decent matchup, follows with the Buffalo Bills, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the New Orleans Saints in the fantasy football playoffs between weeks 15 through 17. That is extremely tough to sell to people and to get them jumping on board thinking that is going to be automatic success, because it's definitely not going to be. But nonetheless, he's a starting running back. And as it currently stands, I have him at number 1 until we hear further information regarding the next player. The thumbnail for today's video is Alexander Mattison. He's currently rostered in 50% of leagues, which is surprising because in the last couple weeks, I've been saying it, whether it was the Hidden Gems video, the week prior's trade targets video, trade for and go after and pick up your respective running back, your blue chip running back's handcuff. And hopefully you guys went ahead and did so, because Alexander Mattison, in my opinion, if in fact we get word that Dalvin Cook is going to be out for the rest of the season, is by far the more valuable prospect. But considering we don't have that information, we have him as our number 2. The reason why I want to go ahead and go after Alexander Mattison, and I believe he could be and will be a better overall prospect if in fact Dalvin Cook is going to miss the rest of the season, is because of what we've already seen and his upcoming schedule. This season already, Alexander Mattison, in the 2 games that he was a starter, put up 20.1 fantasy points and 22.8. We know that the running back, whoever it is in this backfield, whether it's Dalvin Cook or Alexander Mattison, whoever the starting running back for the Minnesota Vikings is an extremely valuable prospect. On top of that, he takes on Detroit, Pittsburgh, and then in the fantasy football playoffs, Chicago, the Rams, and the Green Bay Packers, which we all know that every single one of those teams can be ran upon. And of course, Alexander Mattison would find a lot of success. So this is what I'm going to go ahead and suggest. If we don't get any information regarding Alexander Mattison by tomorrow night's waiver wire priority that's going to run, if we don't get any information regarding Dalvin Cook being out for more than just a couple weeks, then Chuba Hubbard is the play. Otherwise, Alexander Mattison, if there's more information, would be my number one. Moving on to the next running back. Again, besides just Sunday's injuries, Thursday's injuries are certainly going to loom and be something that we have to be prepared for. With DeAndre Swift going down with a shoulder injury himself, Jamaal Williams came in and was a great fantasy prospect. 15 carries for 65 yards, 5 targets, 5 receptions, 18 yards, and 10.8 fantasy points. As we persist throughout the rest of the season, I don't expect DeAndre Swift to be out every single game, but if he's going to rest for this upcoming week, then why not go ahead, pick up Jamaal Williams, find yourself with another starting running back that is going to have value. Currently only rostered in 39% of leagues. I think Jamaal Williams presents incredible value. And not only that, if in fact DeAndre Swift is to come back and re-injure himself, you'll then have the handcuff to the situation, which of course we know has a lot of PPR upside and of course a lot of upside in terms of getting rushing yards, because that is what this team has succeeded the most at all season long. Moving on to our number 4, we have Boston Scott of the Philadelphia Eagles. Due to the fact that, of course, Miles Sanders re-injured himself again. I know it's very unfortunate. It's a foot/ankle injury. If, in fact, we're going to continue to see Miles Sanders be at a limited capacity and or the backup role in this backfield, considering, of course, Kenneth Gainwell is not getting much utilization and Jordan Howard's injured, well, then Boston Scott steps up as the starting running back of this Eagles team. And we all know that they have been running the ball just about more than anybody in the National Football League over the last month. Boston Scott's coming off of a great week, 64 rushing yards on 15 carries, a rushing touchdown, a couple catches for 8 receiving yards, 12.2 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format. Overall, Boston Scott is widely available. Only being rostered in 19% of leagues makes me believe that not only is he available probably in your league, you can go ahead, grab him. They play against the New York Jets this week. We talk about it every single week. The Jets are giving up about 32 points per game to opposing running backs in a half PPR scoring format. That's the most amongst all teams in the National Football League. So why not a team that has been running it more than anybody against a team that cannot stop the run? I think Boston Scott is an incredible pickup and play for you this week. Matt Breida is our number 5. Again, speaking of the Thursday matchups, Matt Breida was great. I know his efficiency wasn't there, but in terms of him being an active part of this offense, getting more utilization, scoring once again, this is beginning to try to pile up, in my opinion. And the fact that Zach Moss was inactive on Thursday's game against the New Orleans Saints leads me to believe that they want Matt Breida to be the starter for the rest of the season. The fact that Devin Singletary was getting the touches during the garbage time also leads me to believe that Matt Breida is going to continue to be the starter. 9 carries for 26 yards, not the greatest, but again, they played against New Orleans, followed with his 2 catches for 29 yards and a touchdown, 12.5 fantasy points. Matt Breida seems to be the guy to own in this backfield going forward. The question is whether or not we can trust a Buffalo Bills running back in the future. I think we can, especially for those of us who are in desperate need of a running back. Moving on to our final running back for today, it is Dontrell Hilliard of the Tennessee Titans. Now, yes, he had himself an incredible game. The huge 60-yard run that he blew out obviously did help him. Otherwise, 12 carries for 131 doesn't really happen against the New England Patriots. On top of that, the thing that I want to mention, of course, he had 17.8 points. He has value, but D'Onta Foreman is probably still the starter there. Dontrell Hilliard is certainly going to participate and contribute. We just have to be careful with the situation because in any given week, if he doesn't bust out a huge run like that, he still has value, but it's not as much upside. That being said, they are on a bye week this week, like I mentioned, along with the Panthers, Packers, and Browns. So if the Tennessee Titans are not available this week to you, is he really that much of a better pickup than some of these other guys? No. That's why I have him at 6, and that is why we have him suggested either way, because he has value going forward. It's just a matter of we can't use him this week. If you need him for the fantasy playoffs, then you'll pick him up. All right, now that we've mentioned our running back waiver wire targets for week 13, we'll move on to the wide receiver position, beginning with Van Jefferson. Now, I know I didn't really want to mention someone that is currently rostered in about 48% of leagues, but considering I was already going to mention Alexander Mattison, Jamaal Williams, Chuba Hubbard, all those kind of handcuffs that are respectively probably already owned in majority of leagues, I wanted to just once again gloss this over. Van Jefferson should be rostered in more than 48% of leagues. His performance of 3 catches for 93 yards and a touchdown, 9 targets were still there. And as long as the opportunity is going to continue to go in his direction, then of course I want to have him on roster, because with Robert Woods gone and Tyler Higbee getting very limited work in the receiving game at times, Odell Beckham dealing with a little bit of a back injury, Van Jefferson continues to gain more and more value as the weeks progress. Just keep an eye on him. If he's available, pick him up. Moving on, DeVante Parker coming off of the injured reserve. Now, the question that I have been posed with a couple times in the last couple weeks, Andrew, who would you rather prefer? Will Fuller coming off of the injured reserve and or DeVante Parker? By far and away, DeVante Parker. I know Tua and him have a far greater relationship and rapport in terms of being able to be, more consistent via their timing. The target production there is going to be far more than if Will Fuller is to step into this offense. Currently rostered in 30% of leagues, I think DeVante Parker is a guy that I potentially want to have on roster based on how well Tua has been playing as of late and the way that the Dolphins have been kind of rocketing forward, winning consecutive games. 3 consecutive weeks here? I think I certainly want to have a piece of this wide receiver core. Moving on to our number 3 option, we have Kendrick Bourne of the New England Patriots. Now, for two of you on yesterday's live stream, Sunday morning, who asked me about Kendrick Bourne, and I told you to play Kendrick Bourne, you are extremely lucky in doing so, because the fact that he came away with 2 receiving touchdowns, 20.6 fantasy points is crazy. But let's just put this out there. I look at Kendrick Bourne as a receiving option similar to a Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They have incredible upside, but often will not find that upside on a consistent basis. That's just the fact. They are inconsistent, volatile wide receivers, and I don't know how much I can trust in them, but I'm willing to give them a try, put them on my bench, and perhaps if I am in desperate need of a wide receiver, why not go ahead and play them in an advantageous matchup? Unfortunately, this week, they take on the Buffalo Bills. But with that said, Tre'Davious White, the number 1 cornerback for the Buffalo Bills, he's got a season-ending injury. There's a potential in which we could see Mac Jones, this receiving core, find success going forward. We already know Jacoby Myers. We already know Nelson Aguilar. Kendrick Bourne has been stepping up, has had himself big upside performances, scattered around the season thus far, but maybe he can go ahead and string them together for more consistency going forward. Russell Gage is our number 4 option. With Calvin Ridley probably not returning anytime soon, it looks like Russell Gage is going to have to be the number 1 receiving target in this offense. Kyle Pitts doesn't get work. Cordero Patterson is a monster running back, and Zach Kesius doesn't do anything. It's really just a matter of Russell Gage being the number 1. He's currently only rostered in 17% of leagues, coming off of a week in which he had 15.2 fantasy points because, of course, that receiving touchdown he had. Either way, I look at the Atlanta Falcons, I think to myself, why not Russell Gage? He has value. He's going to continue to get the most targets out of that group of receivers, so why not get some value out of that? Moving on, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. So here is the issue that I have. Obviously, the Tennessee Titans are on a bye week this week, but if you are looking to try to refill the position of A.J. Brown, then perhaps this is the way to go about it. Obviously, we will potentially be having Julio Jones returning from his injured reserve stint, but again, he has been injured all season long. If he comes back, re-injures himself, I would not be surprised. He's coming off a week in which he had 2 catches, 25 yards, and a touchdown. Overall, is that great production? No, but of the available wide receivers, maybe the best option there. Sterling Shepard's the last wide receiver I wanted to mention. Sterling Shepard has been injured for the last couple weeks himself. But if in fact he comes back into the lineup with Kadarius Toney dealing with injuries, with of course Kenny Golladay just being a nobody out there, it seems like Sterling Shepard could immediately make an impact in this offense. Of course, Daniel Jones is looking to try to get the ball out of his hands as quickly as he can because his offensive line can't hold anybody. So for right now, Sterling Shepard, currently rostered in about 29-30% of leagues, could be a valuable start going forward. We move on to the tight end position, beginning with Cole Kmet of the Chicago Bears, currently rostered in 24% of leagues, coming off of another week in which he had double-digit targets, 11 targets, 8 catches, 65 yards. That's pretty much what he has become. 2 out of the last 3 weeks, he's become this kind of wide receiver option for this team that is getting just about, the second most targets on this team behind the Darnell Mooney. With Allen Robinson being out, of course, they're going to have to utilize the tight end position more and more. Jimmy Graham's participation in this offense obviously does reduce the overall red zone threat of Cole Kmet, but getting between the 20s, Cole Kmet is dominating and finding a lot of value there. And if in fact you are in need of a tight end due to the bye weeks that we're going to face, Cole Kmet's a great option. Moving on, Foster Moreau with Darren Waller going down with an injury on Thursday night's game against the Dallas Cowboys. Of course, the conversation now begins with, is Foster Moreau a valuable enough tight end to go ahead and roster? The last time we were in a scenario in which Darren Waller didn't play, Foster Moreau had 6 targets, 6 catches, 60 yards, and a touchdown for 15 fantasy points. If perhaps we're in a scenario once again this week in which we get Foster Moreau in the starting lineup, Darren Waller out, I don't think it's a bad idea. This team loves to throw the ball to their respective tight ends. Foster Moreau has recently scored a touchdown even when he wasn't the starter. He's getting far more utilization than we saw earlier in the season, and as long as that continues to be consistent, I don't think he's a bad option. The final tight end I wanted to mention is Jack Doyle. Now, earlier this season, Jack Doyle has scored touchdowns. I think in the last 6 weeks, he scored about 3 total touchdowns. The thing about Jack Doyle is that he wasn't really used as a vertical threat. He was used probably down on the line of scrimmage. A lot of the plays were when you motion that tight end across the screen, you do that little, flick shovel straight to him and he walks into the end zone for 1 yard. That's pretty much been what we've seen from Jack Doyle. But yesterday against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they used him as a vertical threat. They used him in the position in which typically Mo Alley-Cox would be playing in. And he found a lot of success in doing so with 6 catches on 7 targets, 81 yards and a touchdown for 17.1 fantasy points. If there's a potential in which they're going to continue to use him in this sort of position as a vertical threat in an offense that, as of right now, can do it all through the air, on the ground, have been successful, Jack Doyle, not a bad option going forward. Moving on to the quarterback position, 1, 2, 3. Beginning with Taysom Hill. Every single quarterback I'm going to be mentioning today starts with the letter T. Taysom is going to be taking the starting position over Trevor Siemian. Obviously, we're going to get Alvin Kamara back, Mark Ingram back. This is going to be a kind of reestablished offense after the debacle of last Thursday on Thanksgiving Day. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they play against the Dallas Cowboys this week and then the New York Jets the week following. I think Taysom Hill has a lot of value in doing so. Currently only rostered in 5% of leagues. We've talked about it earlier in the season. Taysom Hill last year, when he was the starter for 4 weeks, when in fact Drew Brees was injured, there was a consistent stretch of games there where Taysom Hill was finding a lot of success in a 4-point per passing touchdown league, was 19 plus fantasy points in every single one of those games, whether it was throwing touchdowns or finding success on the ground like a Jalen Hurts would do, 40 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, and getting his value there. A lot of potential to be had. Moving on, Tua Tagovailoa. Tua has been the most efficient quarterback in terms of passing completion percentage in the last 2 weeks. He has had a plus 80% passing completion percentage in back-to-back weeks. I mean, I think the stat that I read was that there's only been like 5 other quarterbacks that do that in the last 30, 40 years. Tua is joining a very rare group. I think yesterday he was like 27 of 31 passing. The week before was like 27 of 33. Crazy numbers. As long as he continues to play well and the Dolphins are continuing to trend in this direction, they take on the New York Giants this week, and I think it's a very easy matchup for them. Tua's only rostered in 33% of leagues and finding more and more value as we progress. Trevor Lawrence is the final quarterback that I wanted to mention, mainly because of his upcoming schedule. I don't really care about what he does this week, but I'm looking towards week 14, 15, and 16, where he takes on the Tennessee Titans. The last time he played against them, had himself a great overall performance. Then he plays against the Houston Texans and the New York Jets. Those 3 games could be actually very advantageous for this young quarterback. I understand he has not played well a lot this season. The last, I would say, month plus of his fantasy career has been extremely underwhelming. A lot of less than 10 fantasy point performances, but hopefully this last week against the Falcons kind of gives him more confidence. And as we progress to weeks 14 through 16, we could find a lot of value there with Trevor Lawrence. All right, let's move on to the special team / defensive section of today's video, beginning with the Miami Dolphins defense. Currently only rostered in 43% of leagues, coming off of a 23-point fantasy point performance against the Carolina Panthers. Completely destroyed the Panthers season. Cam Newton looked like garbage. Christian McCaffrey out for the season, etc. They take on the New York Giants. I think certainly there's a potential in which the Miami Dolphins put it on them. In the last 4 weeks, the Miami Dolphins defense has scored 63 total fantasy points. I, of course, want to have a defense that's scoring just about 16 points per week. That is great value to be had. Moving on, the Cincinnati Bengals. They're currently only rostered in 17% of leagues. They take on the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers have been, in a word, inconsistent all season long. They're good 1 week, they're bad the other. If we can get another bad performance out of the Los Angeles Chargers this week, well, of course, there could be potential. Again, in the last 2 weeks, the Cincinnati Bengals defense against the Steelers and the Las Vegas Raiders have put together 29 fantasy points. If they could put together another great performance here, I wouldn't be surprised. The final defense I wanted to mention, the Minnesota Vikings. They take on the Detroit Lions. Of course, we all know the Detroit Lions, Jared Goff. They looked a little bit better last Thursday, but they're still in a little bit of a rut. Without DeAndre Swift in the backfield, they may be in a little bit more trouble than we initially projected. Going into this week, of course, the Minnesota Vikings have already played against the Detroit Lions earlier this season. In week 5, they were able to put together 9 fantasy points. If we can get something like that this week, then why not? Moving on, let's talk about kickers 1 through 3. We have Evan McPherson of the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, in terms of success at the kicker position, Evan McPherson in the last 2 weeks has put together 34 total fantasy points. I mean, at this point, you have to sign a kicker like this. You got to get him on your roster. Only rostered in 16% of leagues, takes on the Chargers. If this ends up being a higher scoring matchup, even better. If not, of course, the Cincinnati Bengals have been blowing out some teams in the last couple weeks. Evan McPherson has been scoring a lot. Why not put him on your roster? Moving on, Robbie Gould, another player that has been scoring a lot, 25 total fantasy points in the last 2 games, takes on the Seattle Seahawks this upcoming week. After, of course, the Seahawks play against the Washington football team today. In week 13, they'll take on the San Francisco 49ers, a red-hot 49ers who have been winning consecutive games. Robbie Gould only rostered in 25% of leagues. Another kicker who is rostered in 26% of leagues is Matt Prater, coming off of the bye week. If, in fact, teams dropped Matt Prater in your league, I think he should be an automatic pickup, mainly because Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins back into this lineup. It will give this team more red zone opportunities. Though Colt McCoy was able to find a lot of success, I think the success in which Kyler Murray presents to this team is far more significant and will lead to far more field goal opportunities and or PAT points. That's what you should be potentially looking for. All right, these are our Week 13 waiver wire targets. I want to thank you all for watching. Again, if you guys have not yet already, check out Underdog Fantasy. There's multiple contests you can participate in, whether it's today, the Thursday night matchup, whether it is the NBA, the NHL, the NFL. There's rest of season best ball drafts. There's a lot of stuff coming down the line. So for those of you who are trying to play fantasy, perhaps your season's coming to an end because of the unbelievable amount of injuries that you've faced, and or someone in your league is just stacked, go ahead and check out Underdog Fantasy. Let's play fantasy the underdog way. Use promo code Andrew today. And of course, they'll be willing to match your deposit up to $100. Thank you everybody for watching. Be sure to subscribe. Click the like button down below. Tomorrow we'll talk about our running back rankings. And until then, guys, enjoy tonight's game. And I'll see you next time. Peace.